At 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday night, I stood near the back wall of a hotel ballroom in Chicago and watched my brother unveil my life's work as if he had built it with his own two hands. The room was full of people in dark suits, expensive watches, and smiles that looked rehearsed. There were cameras near the stage. A live stream timer blinked red in the corner. Behind my brother, a giant screen showed the product name in silver letters. Novakey, the same name I had written in blue ink across the front of my first prototype notebook 2 years earlier. My brother, Caleb, stood under the lights with a microphone clipped to his jacket. He looked calm, proud, almost emotional. "This product," he said, placing one hand over his chest, "started as a crazy idea in my garage." I felt something cold move through my stomach. His garage, not my apartment kitchen, where I had burned coffee at 2 a.m. while testing circuit boards. Not the rented storage unit where I assembled the first working model on a folding table. Not the tiny co-working desk I paid for with tutoring money after my parents told me to stop wasting time. His garage. My mother sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes like she was watching her son accept a Nobel Prize. My father had his arms crossed, nodding with that proud little smile he only ever saved for Caleb. Beside them were investors, family friends, and reporters from 2 startup blogs. Nobody looked at me. Nobody even knew I was supposed to be there. 3 weeks earlier, Caleb had fired me from my own project. 2 weeks earlier, my parents had told everyone I was unstable. 1 week earlier, my mother had texted me, "Do not embarrass your brother at his launch. You have already done enough damage." And that night, Caleb smiled into the cameras and said, "I want to thank my family for believing in me when this was just a sketch on a napkin." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I remembered the actual napkin. It was from a diner on West Belmont. It had a coffee ring on the corner and my handwriting across the middle. I had drawn the original locking mechanism while Caleb sat across from me scrolling through his phone, barely listening. Now he was standing on stage selling my idea to the world. Then the product demo began. The screen changed. A sleek animation showed how Novakey worked. A small smart access device designed for independent pharmacies and medical supply rooms, using timed biometric permission and audit logs to prevent unauthorized access. Every phrase in the presentation was mine. Every safety problem. Every use case. Even the line about protecting small businesses from quiet theft was from my pitch deck. I pressed my nails into my palms so hard they left crescents. Then Caleb looked into the audience and said, "Tonight, I'm proud to announce that we are entering our final patent phase." That was when my phone vibrated. A number from Washington, D.C. I looked down at the screen. Then I looked at Caleb. And for the first time in 3 weeks I smiled. Because what my brother didn't know was that the patent office had not called him. They had called me, too. Before everything broke. My name is Mara Ellison. I was 31 when this happened, and for most of my life I thought being useful was the same thing as being loved. I was the kind of daughter who remembered birthdays, fixed broken printers, picked up prescriptions, cleaned after holiday dinners, and never made a scene. I was also the daughter my parents described as too intense, too sensitive, and hard to understand. Caleb was 2 years older than me, and my mother called him a natural leader, even when he was leading people into trouble. When he dropped out of college after 1 semester, my parents said he was entrepreneurial. When I switched majors from accounting to engineering, they said I was being reckless. When Caleb wrecked my dad's car at 23, Dad said, "Boys make mistakes." When I got a B+ in thermodynamics, my mother asked if I was sure I was smart enough for that field. I learned early that success only counted if Caleb could stand next to it. Novakey began because of a real problem. My best friend, Lena, owned a small pharmacy with her aunt. One winter, they discovered that controlled inventory had been disappearing in tiny amounts for months. Not enough to trigger immediate panic, but enough to put their license at risk. Their security camera caught nothing useful. Their old access log showed only who had a key, not who had opened which cabinet or when. Lena sat at my kitchen table crying into a paper towel. "We could lose everything," she whispered. "My aunt built that place before I was born." That night after she left, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about small businesses that could not afford hospital-level security systems. Pharmacies, clinics, veterinary offices, medical supply rooms. Places where trust was necessary but not always safe. so I started sketching. At first, it was just a locking system with timed access codes. Then I added biometric verification. Then I added tamper alerts. Then I built a crude audit trail that tracked which authorized user opened which compartment and for how long. It was not glamorous. It was not a billionaire fantasy. It was practical, boring, necessary, and mine. For 8 months, I worked on it at night after my job as a systems engineer. I paid for parts myself. I watched tutorials. I ruined 3 prototypes. I cried once when a soldering mistake killed a board I could not afford to replace. The first time the device worked, I was alone. It was 1:16 a.m. My apartment smelled like hot plastic and cheap noodles. The little green access light blinked, the lock clicked open, and the log appeared on my laptop exactly as designed. I sat on the floor and covered my mouth. For 1 minute, I let myself imagine what it would feel like to have my family see me clearly. Not as difficult. Not as jealous. Not as Caleb's little sister. Just me. Someone who had built something real. That was my first mistake. I invited Caleb to coffee and told him about it. 3. The family favorite. Caleb did not steal my idea immediately. That would have been easier to understand. First, he acted impressed. He leaned over my laptop at the diner, scrolling through my prototype photos. His eyebrows lifted in a way that made me feel 12 years old again, desperate for approval from someone who usually treated me like background noise. Mara, he said, this is actually good. Actually, I ignored that word because I wanted the sentence to mean something kind. He asked questions. Smart ones too. What was the market size? How much did 1 unit cost to build? Had I talked to suppliers? Was I protecting the IP? I told him I had started documenting everything. I had dated notebooks, source files, prototype photos, emails with Lena, and a provisional patent application draft I was reviewing with a small business attorney I had found through a startup clinic. Caleb whistled. Look at you, he said. Secret genius. I laughed because I did not know what else to do. 2 days later, he told my parents. Not in a proud way. In a way that made it sound like he had discovered something of mine that needed family management. We were at Sunday dinner. My mother had made roast chicken because Caleb was coming. She only made roast chicken when Caleb came. When I came alone, there were leftovers in plastic containers. Caleb raised his glass and said, Mara's been playing inventor. My mother turned toward me slowly. Playing? I asked. Caleb smiled. You know what I mean. My father wiped his mouth. What kind of invention? I explained it as simply as I could. Small business secure access. Medical inventory protection. Affordable audit logs. My father listened for maybe 30 seconds before looking at Caleb. Is there money in that? Caleb answered before I could. There could be, he said. If it's handled correctly. Handled correctly. That became the phrase that followed me around for the next year. My mother said I was good with details but not people. Dad said Caleb had always been better at presentation. Caleb said investors did not like solo founders with no business face. I should have heard the warning in that. Instead, I tried to be reasonable. Caleb had charisma. He had contacts from failed ventures my parents still called learning experiences. He knew how to pitch. I knew how to build. When he suggested helping me turn Novakey into an actual company, I said yes with conditions. We signed a founder agreement. I insisted on it. That was the one thing that saved me. The agreement listed me as original inventor and majority owner of the underlying technology. Caleb would handle fundraising and operations through a new LLC, but all intellectual property remained assigned to me, unless I signed a separate transfer. Caleb rolled his eyes when the attorney explained it. Relax, he said. We're family. My attorney, a woman named Priya Shah, looked straight at me and said, family is not a substitute for paperwork. I remembered that sentence. For the next 9 months, Caleb and I worked together. At least that was what it looked like from the outside. In reality, I built. Caleb talked. I fixed firmware bugs while he posted vague LinkedIn updates about building in stealth. I ran tests with Lena's pharmacy while he took investor calls from coffee shops. I wrote the white paper while he changed the font and called it branding. Every time I pushed back, he said I was being territorial. Every time I asked to attend a meeting, he said, technical founders scare early money. Let me warm them up first. At home, my parents repeated his version. Mara, don't sabotage this because you need attention, my mother said once while slicing pie. I need to be in the room, I said. Dad sighed. You always make everything a fight. Caleb leaned back in his chair. See, he said softly. This is why I handle people. The cruelest part was that they all looked relieved when he said it. Like my silence was the price of family peace. 4. The betrayal. The first real betrayal happened on a Monday morning in March. I arrived at the small office we rented above a dental clinic and found my keycard disabled. At first, I thought it was a system error. I stood in the hallway holding my laptop bag while the lock flashed red. Inside, I could hear voices. Someone laughed. A printer hummed. I knocked. A woman I did not recognize opened the door. Can I help you? I work here, I said. She looked uncertain. Name? Mara Ellison. Her face changed just enough for me to notice. Oh, she said. You should call Caleb. My pulse started beating in my ears. I called him from the hallway. He did not answer. Then I saw the email. Subject: termination of contractor relationship. Contractor. I opened it with shaking hands. The message said my services were no longer required. It said my access had been revoked due to ongoing instability, disruptive behavior, and refusal to align with leadership priorities. It was signed by Caleb. I read it 3 times because my brain kept rejecting the words. Then the office door opened again. Caleb stepped out wearing the navy blazer he wore for investor calls. Mara, he said, like he had been expecting me to make a scene. Not here. What is this? He glanced toward the office. Lower your voice. You fired me? You were never an employee. I actually stepped back. He had found the one technicality he thought would hurt me most. We had delayed payroll because money was tight. I had kept my day job longer than planned and worked under a contractor invoice structure on Priya's advice until funding closed. But founder status and inventor ownership were separate. He knew that. I knew that. He was counting on me being too shocked to say it. You can't remove me from my own technology, I said. His face hardened. Your technology? He asked. Mara, you had a prototype in a shoebox. I made it a company. You made pitch decks from my documents. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. Listen carefully. The investors know me. The staff answers to me. The launch is in 3 weeks. If you try to interfere, I will bury you in legal fees so deep you'll be begging mom and dad for grocery money. I stared at him. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner and dental disinfectant. Somewhere inside the office, my own test device beeped. Then he said the sentence I never forgot. You were useful, Mara. Don't confuse that with being necessary. For a second, I could not breathe. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove the founder agreement in his face and make him remember every night I had stayed awake building the thing he was now stealing. Instead, I whispered, "You're making a mistake." He smiled. No, he said. I'm making us rich. Then he went back inside and let the door close between us. I stood there alone in the hallway with my disabled keycard in my hand. And for the first time in my life, I did not call my mother crying. She called me first. Not to ask if I was okay. To tell me not to ruin Caleb's future. 5. The moment I stopped begging. By dinner that night, my entire family had already chosen a side. My mother invited me over under the pretense of talking calmly. I should have known better, but some wounded part of me still believed that if I explained clearly enough, they would understand. When I walked in, Caleb was already there. So was my father. So was my Aunt Diane, who had invested $10,000 in Caleb's startup vision, and now looked at me like I was a threat to her retirement. My mother had printed something and placed it on the dining table. It was not my founder agreement. It was a list of my supposed behavior problems. Missed deadlines. Hostile tone. Refused team alignment. Emotional outbursts. I laughed once sharply. My father flinched like the sound offended him. Where did this come from? I asked. Caleb folded his hands. It's documentation. It's fiction. My mother's mouth tightened. Mara, this is exactly what we're talking about. I looked at her. He stole my company. No, she said. He saved it from you. That landed so hard I stopped moving. Caleb leaned back, silent now, letting her do the cutting. My father said, "You're brilliant, honey. Nobody is denying that. But Caleb is the one who can make this real." "I made it real," I said. "You made a device," Dad replied. "He made a business." My Aunt Diane shook her head. "You should be grateful he included you at all. There are moments when betrayal does not feel loud. Feels quiet. Like the world has moved 3 feet away from you. And you are watching people's mouths form words from underwater." I tried one last time. "There is paperwork," I said. "Priya has the agreements. The patent filing lists me as inventor. The original design files are mine." Caleb's smile disappeared for half a second. My mother noticed, but she ignored it. Then she reached across the table and pushed a document toward me. It was a separation agreement. They wanted me to sign away any claim, accept a small payout, and agree not to discuss the company publicly. The payout was $12,000. $12,000 for 2 years of work, my invention, my name, and my silence. I stared at the number. My mother softened her voice, the way she did when she wanted control to sound like love. "Take it, Mara. Start over. Don't make this ugly." I looked at Caleb. He would not meet my eyes. That told me everything. "You're scared," I said. His jaw twitched. Dad slammed his palm on the table. "Enough." The room went silent. Then my father looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "If you try to destroy your brother because of jealousy, you will not be welcome in this family." There it was. The rule finally spoken out loud. Caleb could steal from me, erase me, threaten me, humiliate me, and they would still call it leadership. If I defended myself, they would call it jealousy. My mother pushed a pen toward me. "Sign it." I looked at the pen, then at my family. Then I stood. "No." My mother blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. Caleb laughed under his breath. "You don't have the money to fight this." I picked up my coat. "You're right," I said. "I don't have your money." I looked at him, then at my parents. "But I have the truth." Nobody followed me to the door. That night, my mother removed me from the family group chat. By morning, Caleb had blocked me from the company email. My name had disappeared from the team page. My access to shared files was gone. By afternoon, 3 relatives had texted me versions of the same message. "Please don't hurt your brother because you're upset. You need help. Your parents are heartbroken." Not one person asked what had happened. That was the night I almost broke. I sat on my bathroom floor with my laptop open beside me, scrolling through screenshots, folders, old emails, prototype logs. My hands would not stop shaking. For 20 minutes I cried so hard I could not see the screen. Then one message appeared. It was from Priya. "Do not respond to anyone. Do not sign anything. Send me everything." That was the moment I stopped begging my family to believe me and started preparing to prove them wrong. 6. What they didn't know. Caleb's biggest mistake was thinking my silence meant weakness. It had always meant calculation. I had spent my life in a family where every word I said could be twisted, so I learned to save proof. Not because I was paranoid. Because I was tired of being called dramatic by people who kept creating drama and blaming me for noticing. Priya and I met the next morning in her office. She was calm in a way that made me calmer. She asked for everything. Not just the obvious documents. Everything. The founder agreement. The LLC operating agreement. The provisional patent application draft. The signed engagement letter from the patent attorney. My dated notebooks. Prototype photos. Git commits. Supply receipts. Emails with Lena. Texts from Caleb. Voice memos from our design meetings. Screenshots of Caleb asking me to explain our technology so he could pitch it. For 3 hours we built a timeline. Not an emotional timeline. A legal one. The first sketch. The first working prototype. The first test. The first investor deck. The first time Caleb referred to me as the inventor in writing. The first time he tried to remove that word. Priya read silently, highlighting lines. At one point, she stopped at a message Caleb had sent 6 months earlier. "Can you send me the latest technical explanation? I don't fully understand the access sequence and need to sound smart on the call." Priya looked up. "Well," she said, "that helps." I almost laughed. Then she opened the patent file. The provisional application had been submitted 2 months before Caleb fired me. Officially. With a timestamp. With me listed as sole inventor. With drawings, claim support, and prototype documentation attached. Caleb knew I had been preparing it. He did not know it had been filed. There was one more thing he did not know. The week before he locked me out, I had received a strange message from one of our junior developers, Nikhil. It said, "Hey, I'm uncomfortable with some of the repo changes Caleb requested. Can we talk?" We had talked. Quietly. Nikhil told me Caleb had asked him to migrate source files into a new repository and remove commit history that showed my name. Nikhil had refused to delete anything without written authorization. Caleb then told him not to worry because I was being transitioned out. Nikhil had saved the messages. He sent them to me after I was fired. Priya added them to the folder. Then she said, "I need you to understand something. This may not be instant. People think proof works like lightning. Doesn't. It works like weight. Enough of it placed correctly breaks the table. So we placed it carefully." She sent preservation letters to Caleb and the LLC, demanding that all records, devices, communications, and repositories be preserved. She notified the patent attorney that there was a dispute over inventorship claims being made publicly. She prepared a formal notice to investors warning that Novakey's public launch might include misrepresentations about ownership and intellectual property. But she did not send everything at once. "Let him speak first," she said. I looked at her. She slid a printed invitation across the desk. The launch event. Caleb had not invited me, but the registration link was public. "He is going to make claims in front of investors," Priya said. "If he lies publicly, it becomes much harder for him to pretend this was a misunderstanding." I felt my stomach tighten. "You want me to go? I want the truth in the room when he tries to erase you." For the first time in weeks, I felt something stronger than fear. Not revenge exactly. Clarity. I had stopped arguing because I had started preparing. By the time Caleb realized I was quiet, it was already too late. 7. The reveal. The launch was held in a ballroom at the Langford Hotel, the kind of place with gold light fixtures, polished marble floors, and staff who moved like they had been trained not to make sound. I arrived alone. I wore a plain black dress, low heels, and the necklace Lena had given me after the first successful pharmacy test. It was a tiny silver key. Priya was already inside. She stood near the back with a leather folder under one arm and the expression of a woman who had read every page twice. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said. "Good. You don't need to be okay. You just need to be steady." Across the room my mother saw me. Her face changed instantly. She came toward me fast, heels clicking. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Watching the launch. You were told not to come." "I'm not 12. Her eyes flicked to Priya. "Is this your lawyer?" she asked, saying lawyer like it was a dirty word. Priya smiled politely. "Priya Shah." My mother ignored her and leaned closer to me. "If you embarrass this family tonight, you will regret it." I looked past her toward the stage, where Caleb was laughing with 2 investors. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm done regretting things that other people did." For once, my mother had no immediate answer. The lights dimmed. Everyone took their seats. I stayed near the back with Priya. Caleb walked onto the stage to applause. I had seen him perform before, but never like that. He was glowing. He told the story beautifully, I'll give him that. He talked about small businesses, trust, safety, community pharmacies, protecting vulnerable inventory. He talked about Lena's pharmacy without naming her. He talked about my problem, my research, my prototype, my language. And every time he said, "I," something inside me became quieter. Not weaker. Quieter. Like a door closing. Then came the slide titled, "The Origin Story." On the screen appeared a photo of Caleb in a garage beside a workbench. The prototype on the bench was mine. I knew because of the tiny scratch near the casing, made when I dropped it against my radiator. Caleb said, "This was version 1. Built after months of nights and weekends." Priya leaned toward me. "Did he just claim he built the prototype?" "Yes," I whispered. She made a small note. Then Caleb said, "And yes, for those wondering, our patent protection is well underway. Novakey owns its technology outright." Priya stopped writing. She looked at me. That was the sentence. The one he could not walk back. A man in the front row raised his hand during the Q&A. Can you clarify inventor status? Are you the sole inventor? Caleb smiled. Functionally, yes, he said. There were contractors early on, but the core concept and commercialization were mine. Contractors. A few people nodded. My father did too. My mother smiled like justice had just been served. Then Priya's phone buzzed. Mine buzzed a second later. Washington, D.C. I stepped out into the hallway to answer. This is Mara Ellison, I said, my voice almost too quiet. A woman on the other end confirmed my identity and said she was calling regarding a filing inquiry connected to the NovaKey provisional application, and a related communication received that afternoon from counsel representing NovaKey Systems LLC. My pulse slowed. Not sped up. Slowed. Because suddenly everything was exactly where it needed to be. The company's counsel had tried to assert that the LLC controlled the filing. But the application named me. The assignment documents did not transfer ownership. And Priya's preservation notice had landed before Caleb walked on stage. The call was brief. Official. Careful. Not dramatic like movies. But when I returned to the ballroom, Caleb was still answering questions. He had no idea. Priya leaned toward me. They called. I nodded. She closed her folder. Ready. My mouth was dry. No. She smiled faintly. Good enough. During the final investor Q&A, Priya raised her hand. Caleb noticed her and looked annoyed, probably assuming she was press or a vendor. Yes, he said. Priya stood. Priya Shah, attorney for Mara Ellison. The room changed. Not loudly. Changed in posture. Heads turned. Shoulders shifted. My mother froze in the front row. Caleb's smile held, but only barely. I'm sorry, he said. This is a private Q&A for investors. One of the investors, a woman in a gray suit, turned around. I'd like to hear the question. Priya nodded. Mr. Ellison, you stated tonight that NovaKey Systems LLC owns the technology outright, and that you are functionally the inventor. Is that correct? Caleb laughed once. I'm not going to get into legal technicalities during a launch. Priya's voice stayed calm. Understood. Then I'll be specific. Did Mara Ellison create the original NovaKey prototype demonstrated in your presentation? My mother stood halfway. This is inappropriate. The investor in gray held up one hand without looking at her. Let him answer. Caleb's face flushed. Mara contributed early technical support, he said. A sound left me before I could stop it. Not a laugh. Not a sob. Something in between. Priya opened the folder. Early technical support, she repeated. Is that how you describe the person listed as sole inventor on the provisional patent application filed 2 months before you terminated her access? The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence where even the air conditioning sounds guilty. Caleb stared at her. My father turned slowly toward him. My mother's hand went to her necklace. Priya continued. Is that also how you describe the person whose dated engineering notebooks contain the original mechanism sketches, whose supply receipts match the first prototype, whose source commits were later moved into a new repository, and whose name your developer was instructed to remove from visible records? Someone in the second row whispered. Oh my God. Caleb gripped the podium. That is a gross mischaracterization. Priya pulled out another page. Would you like me to read your text message from September 14th? The one where you wrote, can you send me the latest technical explanation? I don't fully understand the access sequence and need to sound smart on the call.